Welcome, everybody, to the nationwide prayer campaign to end abortion forever. It's good to be back. I've been on a week vacation, a little bit under the weather, but all is well now. Today we have Bob Marshall, and he's going to be talking about can Trump still win? So let's get on with the prayers. God bless you all. Hi, everybody. How are you today? Thank you for praying again. And today is the 1st of December, believe it or not. Coming out of being ill, I'm so happy to be back to say hello to you. I missed you a lot. Today we have Bob Marshall. Delegate Bob Marshall, who served in the Virginia General Assembly for 26 years as a Republican legislature, was a congressional aide to three members of Congress. Bob Marshall and a colleague devised the original 1976 Hyde Amendment cutting off Medicaid abortion funding. Bob later devised other abortion funding amendments on military, civil service, foreign aid, Indian Health Service, and prisons appropriations bills that are still federal law. Bob was the House of Delegates author of 2006 Virginia voter approved one man, one woman marriage amendment and the still on the books ban on partial birth infanticide. He is the author of more than 50 Virginia laws. He won a precedent setting lawsuit, Marshall versus North Virginia Transportation Authority, over Governor Tim Kaine, the Attorney General, the Speaker of the House of Delegate, and two-thirds of the Virginia General Assembly as the only sitting state legislator to legally challenge a law that granted power to unelected officials to raise transportation taxes. The Virginia Supreme Court agreed with Delegate Marshall in a 7-0 decision in 2008. Bob Marshall is a co-author of Blessed Are the Barren, Ignatius Press, a social history of Planned Parenthood. His Eminence John Cardinal O'Connor and Dr. Barnard Nathanson, who founded NARAL, wrote prefaces to Bob's book. Bob also wrote Reclaiming the Republic, a how-to civics book for Christians to learn the levers of civic power, published in 2018 by TAM Books. Virginia newspapers recognized Bob Marshall as very well versed in parliamentary tactics. Bob and his wife Kathy have 5 children and 10 grandchildren. Welcome, Bob, again. How are you today?
Well, thank you for having this program today.
Okay. Now speak again, Bob, because I just want to make sure that you're clear. Can you speak again?
Can you hear me now?
That's perfect. Okay. Okay, so Bob, I'm just gonna let you take this because you're gonna break this down on what goes on next. Can Trump actually win?
Okay, well, if you have a question, you can stop me or write it down and ask me at the end. But some people are wondering why former Mayor Giuliani and young woman attorney are going around the country with hearings. The reason they're doing this is because there is still a path to victory for Donald Trump for his reelection. Now, it may be a narrow path, but it's nevertheless a legal constitutional one. That is not just my conclusion or Mayor Giuliani's or some of his assistants. Alan Dershowitz, who is a liberal professor retired from Harvard University, agrees. Fareed Zakaria of CNN also agrees. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina also agrees that there's a path, and others as well. So this is not stealing an election. This is seeking an honest election with an honest count. Now, first of all, how is this possible legally, constitutionally? First, the Constitution states each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors, equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which that state may be entitled in Congress. That's Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. Now, a nearly 120-year-old Supreme Court decision held the following. The appointment of these electors is thus placed absolutely and wholly within the legislatures of the several states and cannot be taken from them or modified by their state constitutions, or I might add, CNN. Now, they weren't talking about that in 1892, but let me continue with the decision here. There can be no doubt of the right of the legislature to resume the power at any time, for it can neither be taken away nor abdicated. Now, that decision was McPherson versus Blacker in 1892. Third, in the contested 2000 presidential election, remember Al Gore and George Bush, the Supreme Court, in the case of Bush versus Gore, which was also a contested election, stated, quote, when the state legislature vests the right to vote for president in its people, the right to vote as the legislature has prescribed is fundamental. The state, of course, after granting the franchise in the special context of Article 2, can take back the power to appoint electors. Now, what that means is no Supreme Court of a state can alter election laws. Only the state legislature could do that. Specifically in Pennsylvania, you had the state Secretary of State and the state Supreme Court changing the deadline for the receipt of absentee ballots. They have no authority to do that. In Georgia, you had the Secretary of State and a former Democrat gubernatorial candidate, Stacey Abrams, agree to change the verification procedures for absentee ballots, which the legislature had clearly spelled out. Again, this is not authorized under Bush v. Gore, under that understanding. Now, what is a reason to challenge an election? Supreme Court said in Bush versus Gore, the grounds for contesting an election include receipt of a number of illegal votes or rejection of a number of legal votes sufficient to change or place in doubt the result of the election. Now, in every election, there's going to be some mistakes, and unfortunately, there'll be some fraud. But if it's not sufficient to change the outcome, state legislatures have to be left with that, and they can take no further action. However, there are good reasons to consider that there are, in fact, reasons to doubt this election process. In at least 6 states, affidavits, which is a swearing under oath or an affirmation subject to the penalty of perjury, which penalty in Virginia is 5 years in jail, that what you are affirming is true, or you're saying other people are making false statements. This is a very serious step to take when you file one of these affidavits. It's like being in court and swearing to uphold the truth and tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So in 5 states with Republican majorities, they are Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, where significant questions have arisen regarding the validity of the vote, where affidavits have been filed under penalty of perjury. Now, when I say Republican control, that means there may be a Democrat governor, but the majority of the legislature, both the House and the Senate, is held by Republicans. There's another state where these affidavits have been filed. It's Nevada, but there's no Republican majority there. Now, such claims need to be about the honesty and outcome of the election, need to be addressed consistent with deadlines for the presidential election, so the American people can have confidence in the fairness of the presidential election. Again, if I've worked hard and I still lost, okay, one thing. But if I worked hard and had the victory stolen from me or my candidate, I'm not going to accept the legitimacy of the election, nor the validity of the actions taken by such a candidate who would assume office. Now, the legislatures of these states have the duty to establish, within the words of the Supreme Court, whether or not the receipt of a number of illegal votes or the rejection of a number of legal votes sufficient to change or place in doubt the result of the outcome of the election. Claiming that a state legislative inquiry to establish legality and fairness of the presidential election is actually an attempt to overthrow the will of the people is just false. It is the reverse. It is an attempt to establish the will of the people. The term legal vote was used by Al Gore in his filing in the Bush v. Gore case in 2000. Again, only legal votes should count, not illegal ones. So when Biden company says count all the votes, that includes bad ones. You shouldn't do that. There are three types of illegal and irregular action that have occurred in at least 6 states in the United States during the 2020 presidential election. First, it has been observed and experienced that Republicans were denied access to oversee the vote count process, and only Democrats were allowed. When I was running for office, every time I ran, I was given a statement by the election board to sign my name and designate individuals to count the vote, to watch the count of the vote after the polls were shut, and also to stay in while the polls were active and voting. Even though that's the law in all the states, Democrats and local officials kept Republicans out in all these states. Second category of legal violations is the changing of state election laws by state courts or by administrative agencies in complete violation of the finding in the 2000 Bush v. Gore Supreme Court decision. The third set of violations is certifying civilian absentee ballots improperly without sufficient documentation or accepting absentee ballots after deadlines established by the legislature. Now, in a voter integrity commission, of which President Jimmy Carter was a member and Secretary of State Republican James Baker was also co-chair, they both acknowledged absentee ballots is where a majority of frauds take place. Now, legislatures are routinely, this is the state and the federal, are routinely called upon to establish facts. And oftentimes they put a set of findings at the beginning of a proposed law. This is whereas we find the following 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Courts use those findings to understand the application of the statute in the minds of the legislature and to determine the legislative intent. Now, such standards as are used to establish facts in other cases should be used by the legislatures to establish facts of fraud or absence of fraud in the 2020 election. And the affidavits that have been filed, that have been placed before courts, should also be examined, not just by the courts, because they have certain rules for accepting those statements, but they should be examined by the legislatures who have the duty to monitor this. The legal constitutional authorities can be found for this in a well-researched article in Western Journal. Now, recently, or last week, Pennsylvania legislators held informal hearings on the conduct of the 2020 election. Pennsylvania Senator Doug Mastriano laid out his position in a very compelling testimony later. He and others were there, found sufficient elements of fraud. They introduced a resolution. However, nothing was done. The Pennsylvania General Assembly adjourned on Monday, did not file this challenge to the certification of the electoral votes as determined by the state Secretary of State. Arizona had a similar hearing yesterday. Now, facts are facts, but it's not enough to get things done. Remember, when Peter was confronted before Jesus was crucified, aren't you a friend of the accused? He said no. Peter certainly knew the truth about Jesus. He had faith in him, but he lacked courage to defend him at that point. And he only did it after the Holy Spirit descended upon him after the resurrection. So the way that you get the legislators to have courage is you write them and let them know what you think. You say, but wait a minute. I don't live in one of these contested states. I direct your attention to the First Amendment, which says that the government may not prohibit citizens from petitioning their government for redress of grievance. The fact is that legislators in these 5 states are going to make decisions that will directly impact you by what they do or fail to do. So you have every right constitutionally, legally, and certainly morally to write legislators in those states and ask them to make these inquiries. And if they find problems, make the appropriate decision to say that, the election results claimed by the State Board of Elections are in dispute. Now, we also have the circumstance in Pennsylvania where over the past weekend, the Speaker of the House claimed there wasn't enough time to consider the resolution introduced by the state senator. Well, that's not true. How do I know it's not true? Even though they went out of session on Monday, the Constitution of Pennsylvania, Article 2, Section 4, states the following: special sessions shall be called by the governor on petition of a majority of members elected to each house. The use of the term shall is a mandate. It means must. Otherwise, the Constitution would have said the special sessions may be called by the governor. In fact, in the next part of Article 2, Section 4, the next clause, it does talk about the governor may have the interest to call a special session. But if a majority of the House and Senate, and they're controlled clearly by Republicans, say, we want you to do this, the governor simply has a ministerial function. He must call the special session. So when the Speaker said there's not enough time, that may have been a good reason, but it wasn't the real reason. That's unfortunate. And for example, sufficient facts, if you saw those hearings, were clearly established in that Gettysburg public hearing, recounted by the American Spectator, talking about Vice President Biden receiving a batch of ballots that recorded some 570,000 votes for Joe Biden and only 3,200 for Donald Trump. I have never, in my entire time in the legislature, I never saw such a disparate difference in vote input or results anywhere in federal or state elections. Now, again, I say, if it is established that the outcome of the presidential election established by the legislature fails to follow state law and establish processes, that the outcome of the election is in doubt, in the words of the Supreme Court, the legislature must take formal actions as a legislature to inform the United States Congress that the legislature declares the selection of presidential electors by their Secretary of State to be in dispute. And they're going to have to submit their own statement identifying which set of electors they think should be sent to Washington. Now, the United States Code in the Electors Clause provides that when a state, quote, has failed to make the choice on the day prescribed by law, the electors may be appointed on a subsequent day in such manner as the legislature of such state may direct. Doesn't say as the Secretary of State may direct, or the governor, or CNN, or politically liberal pundits, or National Review Online. It says as the state legislature may direct. So we have the situation where you've got, I think actually have hearings going on now in Michigan. But what are the mechanics of this? Remember, to win the presidency, a candidate has to receive 270 electoral votes. If you receive 269, you don't win. Now, if enough swing states, and right now it's claimed that Mr. Biden has 306 tentatively electoral votes, that means if electoral votes from enough states, and it would be 37 electoral votes, are in question, are pulled back, or awarded to Donald Trump, who Mr. Trump still wouldn't have 270, neither would Joe Biden. What happens? This is what happens. It's provided in the 12th Amendment, quote, if no person has such majority, then from the persons having the highest numbers not exceeding 3 on the list of those voted for president, the House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president. But in choosing the president, this is done in early January, the vote shall be taken by states, the representatives from each state having 1 vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all the states shall be necessary to a choice. Now, there are 50 states, 26 states, or 27, based on an election, I think, in Iowa, where a pro-life Republican woman won by 6 votes. I don't think if that's the final outcome, that's the winner. That would make 27. That means that if the election, because there are not 270 electoral votes for either Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden, goes into the House of Representatives. When the House reassembles itself from the Electoral College and then the Senate goes and reassembles itself, there's an election taking place. And all the members from California get together and they decide by a majority vote in their caucus who's going to get the vote. We know the answer to that. It's going to be Biden. However, even though California has, I think, 53 members of the House of Representatives, and say Montana has one, the vote by California and the vote by Montana is the same. So there's one vote that comes out from Montana and one from California. So the smallest state in power has the same authority to elect the president as the largest state. So there being 26 state delegations in Congress where there are Republican majorities, Pennsylvania has 9-9. That's a tie. It won't count. That means that Mr. Trump would have been elected by the House of Representatives to be president. This happened in 1824. So it was there for contested elections. It's not an anomaly. It's not illegal. It's not cheating. It's not stacking the deck. It's doing none of those things. It's following the Constitution. How do you get this done? I would suggest citizens concerned with the outcome of the election being fair should write the legislators in these 5 states. I mentioned Nevada, but there's not a Republican majority there, so it's highly unlikely that writing the Nevada legislature would be effective to produce a decision to oversee these claims and to make an evaluation of them. So if you write to these people and ask them, please conduct an inquiry based on the affidavits sworn under penalty of perjury in your state. All you're doing is asking for a fair election, but you need to give the courage here to the outcome. And that's why we need citizens like you watching this program right now to write the legislators, because even though they have the facts and even though they have the Constitution on their side, we saw in Pennsylvania that the leadership balked. They didn't want to follow through. So you, the citizens of the United States, own the government of the United States. You've got to be active in ensuring that your rights are protected, and those who are charged with protecting your rights find that they have support from you to do their duty. Now, I'll stop right there and you can ask me whatever questions you want.
Okay, so you already have a letter that we could copy and paste, and I'll put it on the website, correct?
Right, and you, I think, have the list of the Republican legislators in the various states, in the 5 states of Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
So are you saying we have to write 5 letters? It's a
No,
duplicate letter, right?
You can take the same letter and copy it and paste it in the blind BCC of an email and write these members of the 5 legislatures.
So even though, this is not the norm, it's the extra step we have to take in order to make sure that the election process is fair and legal.
Correct.
And it's our obligation.
Your moral obligation. And if you look at the policies that Mr. Biden wants to implement, Christians might as well be living in the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin. There will be persecution of Christians because Mr. Biden wants to sign the Equality Act, which compels Christian churches to accept the behavior that has been rejected in the Old and New Testament as a condition of existing. I mean, not just your tax exempt status, but if you have a school that you want the students to be able to go to and fulfill the compulsory attendance laws, you're going to have 2 guys who think they're married to each other, dressing in different kind of clothing as teachers. And if you don't have them, your school will be litigated into oblivion. You will lose the lawsuits because the Democrats have made a pact here to sign this or push this Equality Act, and Joe Biden says he wants to do it. He wants to compel you to pay tax money to kill children before birth. And he calls himself a practicing Catholic. I don't know what kind of practicing Catholic that is, but he has every one of these. He also intends to make it illegal to own a semi-automatic firearm, which is, again, these firearms are used in self-defense. So this is a very dangerous time.
Yes, and so he already said that his first executive order would be to fund Planned Parenthood. So, we know what his intentions are. So, okay, so for for everybody, within the next hour, I will put it up on my website, johnleaps.com. It's going to be a file, a PDF that you could click on, johnleaps.com, and I will upload that from the letter you sent me, and then we copy and paste to all of the 5 different states. And someone's asking the states. It's Washington, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, right?
No, it's
All right.
Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, not Washington State. Now, there's 5 states where there are both Republican majorities, and affidavits have been filed under penalty of perjury, alleging that serious infractions of regular order and fairness have taken place, and as well as illegalities. I mean, it's very simple. In Pennsylvania, the Secretary of State changed the law. The Pennsylvania attempted to change the law. Should actually do it. In fact, the legislature had passed a statute saying that all absentee ballots must be received by 8 p.m. November 3rd. The Secretary of State said, oh no, we're going to receive them through the Friday after the election. She has no authority to do that. The Supreme Court said in Bush v. Gore, only the legislature could do that. The legislature didn't do it. They set the deadline at 8 o'clock, and that's what it should be. But they went on counting votes, and that's the votes counted after the 8 o'clock deadline were the ones that put Trump in the minority.
And then the same thing is going to be applied to the other states.
Right. There's again 3 categories of problems: is making up your own law, not counting all the votes, and denying Republicans access to oversee the vote count. I mean, the Democrats wouldn't like that. I mean, this is just foolishness that you think that they won't pull this again if they're not swatted down.
Right. So basically, what we're doing is we're telling them that they can't do what they're doing. We're pushing them to do what's right.
We're we're strongly urging them to do their duty to establish facts, and if you find that there are sufficient problems that would change the outcome of the election, if they find there's problems but not enough to change the outcome of the election, they have to accept what it is, and we have to accept it. But if they make diligent inquiry and find out that there are sufficient problems, they have a moral obligation, they have a constitutional right, and they need to be courageous enough to do this in front of the media firestorm that will happen. I mean, you'll say there'll be allegations you're a bigot, racist, hate monger, you're overthrowing an election. You're not overthrowing an election. You're establishing what was the election, and you're kicking out illegal votes. You can't allow this to happen. It destroys a democracy. This is what happens in communist countries.
Yes, amen. So another option which may be easier is we have a new pro-life platform. It's a pro-life social media. I'm going to be playing it right after we say thank you to Bob Marshall, the delegate, for teaching us all of this. And under my wall, you'll see the information that he's talking about. And maybe, Bob, you should put it under your wall too. And then people could copy paste right out of that onto a document and then just duplicate that 5 times. So the website is Triumph of Life, and you'll see it in a couple of minutes. I'll be playing it on. I hope it comes out okay. Yes. So God is going to help us. We have to have faith, and we thank you so much for being vigilant. Um, Bob, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and everybody here does too. Thank you. So I'm going to continue with the next with the video that's coming up, and it's going to show what the next platform is all about. And then when they visit that, they could go ahead and copy and paste, because I put it up already yesterday. Now this is brand new, so there's not that many people on it, and only you, like, know about this. So I was told to go ahead and to bring some people on as a pilot. So you're invited, and next month we're going to just go crazy, and invite a lot of people all over the United States. But for now, it's not going to be big, because we're still designing it. So thank you all for coming, and stay tuned for this next video coming up. Uh-oh.
What if there was a social media platform out there that had your values, your core Christian beliefs, and very pro-life, yet at the same time, very cool and modern? Do we have a surprise for you? We are unleashing a media platform that upholds the dignity of life, elevating virtue, and an initiative to spread God's love. It is a meeting ground where we can share our joys and sorrows, aspirations, and need for continued growth and learning. A place that includes God. Yes, you heard it right. This place is God-centered, and we come to grow in faith and offer a word of hope to those going through rough times. If you find all these things something that you want, hold on, there's more. You will find the latest news that you want to hear about. You will find exciting faith-based events, concerts, live dramas, conferences, retreats, movies to attend either at a venue or streamed. You will have available courses to form you into the person God made you out to be. It's never too late or early to learn. You will be able to have available scripture classes with the best biblical scholars. There will be available healing services for the restoration of the children of God. The name of this social platform is Triumph of Life, and it's coming really soon.